New York City, December 12, 2024. The city that never sleeps was bustling as usual. The sound of car horns echoed through the streets, while subway trains rushed beneath the skyscrapers. But within the cold, steel walls of Federal Reserve Bank of New York, something was about to happen that would send shockwaves through the financial world. It would become the stuff of legends whispered in dark corners of the city and eventually the world. On the 12th of December, just days before Christmas, the Federal Reserve was holding over $1.2 billion in gold reserves. These bars, stored in a vault designed to withstand bomb attacks, represented more than just money. They symbolized the wealth and power of the United States. The vault was thought to be unbreachable, but someone knew better. The plan had been in the making for over a year. Involved were Tomas, a former security expert for the Federal Reserve. He knew the vault better than anyone. A disgraced former employee, fired for misconduct. He had deep knowledge of every security protocol, every weak point. He was the key. Rachel Marks, a high-profile banker with connections in Wall Street and an intimate knowledge of the Fed's financial operations. She had access to sensitive information and was the one who knew exactly when the vault would be at its weakest. Jake, the Ghost D'Angelo, a tech genius and hacker who had spent years in the underground hacking community. Jake was the one who could manipulate the systems, disable the alarms, and erase any traces of their presence. They were a team of experts, and their motive wasn't greed, it was revenge. Each of them had been wronged by the very institutions they planned to rob. But this heist wasn't just about money. It was about dismantling the system that had betrayed them. They were going to take everything and disappear. Tomas, Rachel, and Jake had been meeting in secret locations, devising their plan. They spent months studying the Fed security systems, mapping out every move. But they knew they needed someone on the inside, someone who could trigger the heist when the time was right. Enter David Fincher, a middle-aged employee in charge of the Fed's janitorial staff. He wasn't the obvious choice, but that was the beauty of it. David had been working at the Federal Reserve for over a decade, cleaning the vaults, polishing security screens, and handling the smallest details. He was invisible. Tomas, with his charm, convinced David to play a role in the heist. David was promised a cut of the stolen gold, a promise that seemed too good to resist. His only job was to make sure the vaults were unlocked just long enough for Jake to hack into the system and disable the cameras and alarms. The clock ticked down. The night had fallen over New York City, and the usual hum of the metropolis faded as the evening passed. Tomas, Rachel, and Jake were already inside. They had arrived earlier in the evening, posing as maintenance workers to avoid suspicion. Rachel used her influence to get clearance for the maintenance team. No questions asked. David had already unlocked the vault entrance at exactly 11:25 p.m., using his janitor's pass to gain access. He walked around the corridors, cleaning and preparing the place, all the while keeping an eye on the time. Meanwhile, Jake was in the tech room, the heart of the Fed security system. From here, he could control the alarms, disable surveillance cameras, and open the vault doors. His fingers flew over the keyboard as he hacked into the mainframe system. 5 minutes, he whispered into his earpiece, eyes glued to the screen. Outside, Tomas and Rachel moved swiftly, gliding through the air vents that led them directly to the vault. They were dressed in dark clothing, with masks concealing their identities. Tomas felt a rush of adrenaline as they approached the vault. They were so close. David, acting as if nothing was out of the ordinary, continued his work on the lower floors, taking care not to raise suspicion. 11:55 p.m., Jake pressed the final key. The Fed security system blinked green, signaling that all alarms were disabled. The vault doors slowly began to open. It was time. Tomas, Rachel, and Jake entered the vault, their hearts racing. In front of them lay $1.2 billion worth of gold bars, stacked neatly in rows. They could hear the hum of the vault's backup power system, the only thing keeping the vault alive after the cameras had been disabled. They had prepared for this moment for over a year. But now, it wasn't just about stealing gold. It was about making sure no one ever found out how they did it. They worked quickly, filling bags with gold bars. They didn't need to take everything, but they took enough. Tomas glanced at the clock. They had 5 minutes before the backup security system reset. Once that happened, everything would be locked down and their window would close. Rachel signaled to Tomas and Jake. They knew the escape route, through the service tunnels below the building. As they exited the vault, Tomas was about to close the door when he heard a distant sound. Footsteps. Someone was coming. The sound grew louder. Tomas froze. It was David's signal. He had to act fast. "We got to go." "Now," Tomas whispered. They grabbed the last of the gold bars, making their way through the dimly lit corridors. Rachel was in front, Jake following closely behind, and Tomas bringing up the rear. Suddenly, as they turned a corner to head down the service tunnel, they saw something that made their blood run cold. A security guard was standing at the end of the hallway, just a few feet away. Tomas's heart raced. They had no way out. The security guard stood just a few feet away, blocking the narrow hallway leading to the service tunnels. Tomas's mind raced and his body froze. The plan had been so precise, so perfect, until now. His heart pounded in his chest, and he could hear every step of the guard's boots on the polished floor. Rachel was the first to react. She pulled Tomas back into the shadows behind a large steel support beam, her breath quick and shallow. Jake followed suit, sliding into the same hiding spot. The guard was only about 10 feet away. They had nowhere to go. Tomas knew that if the guard took even one more step in their direction, the whole thing was over. The vault's backup security system would reset any moment, and with the guard calling for backup, the entire building would be locked down, trapping them inside. The Federal Reserve's response time was quick. By the time they made it to the service tunnels, the whole place would be crawling with law enforcement. The group stood still, breathing quietly, waiting for the guard to move. The guard stopped in front of the elevator, seemingly checking something on his radio. He didn't see them. Tomas's mind raced with possibilities. What was the guard doing? Was he waiting for backup? Or had he heard something that made him pause? Seconds ticked by like hours. The guard fiddled with his radio for a while, then muttered to himself, "You're being paranoid. Get a grip." To Tomas's astonishment, the guard turned around and began walking back the way he had come. Tomas exhaled, a mix of relief and disbelief flooding his body. "He's gone," Rachel whispered. But the tension wasn't over. Tomas knew it was only a matter of time before they were caught. Their exit needed to be clean and fast. The clock was ticking, and the longer they lingered, the greater the risk. They didn't wait for long. The moment the guard turned the corner, Tomas signaled to Rachel and Jake. They sprinted down the hall, moving as quickly and quietly as they could. The service tunnels were their only hope. This was a route they had planned months ago, and it was the only way to escape without being caught on security cameras. The service tunnels were dimly lit, with only a few emergency lights glowing faintly on the walls. As they rushed through the maze of corridors, Tomas couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creeping over him. They were so close to escaping, but he knew the consequences if they didn't make it out. They rounded a corner, and Tomas felt his heart leap when he saw the exit door just ahead. Beyond that, the city streets awaited them. "We're almost there," Jake muttered. As they reached the exit, Tomas tried the door. It was unlocked. For a moment, he felt a wave of euphoria. They were going to make it. They were going to walk out of the Federal Reserve with $1.2 billion in gold unscathed. But then Tomas heard the sound he dreaded most. A voice over the radio. Code read in the vault. "Activate lockdown protocols." The doors they had just opened began to automatically close. The voice on the radio crackled again. "Vault breach detected. Lockdown initiated. Secure the building immediately." Tomas's stomach dropped. The doors shut with a heavy thud, and suddenly, the whole tunnel felt colder. They were trapped. Panic began to set in. "We need to move. Now," Tomas said, his voice low but urgent. They turned around, try and make their way back to the tunnels, but the moment they did, the exit door they had just come through slammed shut, locked. The service tunnels were no longer an escape route. They were now part of the trap. Tomas could feel his pulse racing. They had seconds to think. Rachel grabbed Tomas's arm. She had an idea. There's a backup maintenance hatch on the far end of the corridor. It's a last resort, but it's our only chance. They had no time to hesitate. The whole building was about to go into full lockdown, and any moment now, security would swarm the tunnels. They sprinted down another passage, following Rachel's lead. But the deeper they went, the darker it became. The tunnels were getting narrower, the sounds of sirens and alarms growing louder. They reached a heavy iron door marked maintenance access. Rachel yanked it open. It creaked loudly, but there was no turning back. Inside, it was pitch black. "Stay close. We need to move fast," Rachel whispered. Jake and Tomas stepped inside, but something wasn't right. The air felt heavy, oppressive. Tomas could barely make out the shape of a ladder, leading upward to what seemed like a manhole cover. "This is it," Rachel said. "We climb out, disappear, and we're free. We're so close." But as Tomas reached the top of the ladder, something flashed in his mind. A faint sound. Someone was already up there. "Who's there?" Tomas called out softly. There was no answer. He hesitated, unsure whether to continue. Just as Tomas pushed the manhole cover up, a cold hand grabbed his wrist from above. A voice he hadn't heard in years. "I thought you'd be here, Tomas." It was a voice from his past. A voice he didn't expect to hear again. Tomas's heart stopped. Who was waiting for him at the top? Tomas froze. The hand on his wrist tightened, pulling him up out of the manhole. "I thought you'd be here, Tomas." Tomas's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to catch his breath. The voice was unmistakable. It was Victor Roman, his old partner from years ago, before he had left a life of crime behind. Tomas had tried to forget him, tried to start fresh. But now, here he was, standing in front of him, looking as if he had never left the game. Victor was grinning, but there was something cold in his eyes. "I see you've been busy. Gold heist, huh? Didn't think you had it in you." Tomas tried pull away, but Victor's grip was strong. The man was no stranger taking control of a situation. Tomas felt a familiar rush of panic in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had to think. "Victor, what the hell are you doing here?" Tomas demanded, his voice hoarse. Victor just chuckled, pulling Tomas out of the tunnel and into the dimly lit alleyway above. "The question isn't what I'm doing here, Tomas. It's what you're doing here. Looks like you haven't changed much. You always did like running with the wrong crowd." Rachel and Jake had followed Tomas up the ladder, but now they hesitated, staring at Victor with suspicion. "Tomas, who is this?" Rachel whispered, her hand on her sidearm. Victor waved off the question with a smirk. "The name's Victor. I used to run with Tomas back in the day. Let's just say we have some unfinished business." Tomas's mind raced. What was Victor doing here? Now of all times. Was he a cop? Or worse, was he here to sabotage the heist? Tomas couldn't trust him. Not now. Victor gestured for Tomas, Rachel, and Jake to follow him down a side street. The air was thick with tension. They had to get out of the city before the authorities locked everything down. But Tomas had no idea if Victor was an ally or a threat. Once they were out of sight, Victor turned around and spoke in a low voice. "I didn't come here to stop you, Tomas. I came here to help." Rachel raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. She had no love for anyone who had ties to crime. "Help us? With what? Stealing gold? What's your angle, Victor?" Victor didn't flinch. Instead, he walked over to a rusty dumpster, pulling out a duffel bag filled with cash. "I'm not interested in the gold. I'm after something far more valuable." He opened the bag to reveal a briefcase inside, filled with documents and encrypted files. Tomas stared at the briefcase in disbelief. This wasn't just about the money. This was something else entirely. "What's this?" Tomas asked, taking a step forward. Victor smiled darkly. "This is the key to everything. Your gold is just a distraction. The real prize? It's all right here." Tomas felt a chill run down his spine. What was Victor talking about? Why had he brought this into the mix? Victor closed the briefcase with a snap, locking it tight. He turned back to face Tomas. "You've been part of something bigger than you realize, Tomas. You've made a lot of enemies. And now, I'm here to make sure you come out on top. But you need to trust me." Tomas had no idea what to think. The past few days had already turned his life upside down. But this was something else. This wasn't just about a robbery anymore. Trust you? Tomas asked, his voice sharp. You think I'm going to trust you after you disappear for years and then show up in the middle of a heist? Victor didn't flinch. He wasn't worried. You don't have to trust me, Tomas. But you will. His voice dropped. You want to get out of this mess alive? You need me. And you need to get your hands on this briefcase. Tomas looked over at Rachel and Jake. Both of them seemed uneasy, but Rachel nodded slightly, as if signaling him to hear Victor out. She wasn't ready to abandon their escape just yet. Fine, Tomas said reluctantly, but this better be worth it. Victor led them down a dark alley, ducking into a small, windowless van parked in shadows. He passed the briefcase to Tomas, who hesitated for a moment before taking it. As Tomas sat in the van with the rest of the crew, Victor turned to face them. There's one more thing you should know. The authorities are already closing in on you. The FBI has been tracking you for months. Tomas's heart skipped a beat. The FBI? What do you mean? How do you know that? Rachel asked, her voice tense. Victor leaned back, crossing his arms. Let's just say, I have friends in high places. Tomas glanced down at the briefcase, still unsure what was inside. But one thing was clear. The FBI was on their tail, and they didn't have much time. Suddenly, the van's radio crackled to life. A voice from the other end spoke in a rushed, urgent tone. Victor, we have a problem. The feds are already on their way to the tunnels. They know exactly where you're going. Get out now. Victor's face went pale. What the hell? He muttered under his breath. Then, looking directly at Tomas, they know we're here. The clock's ticking. We need to go now. But just as Victor turned to open the door, a flash of lights appeared at the end of the alley. They weren't alone. The FBI had arrived. Tomas's pulse raced as the sound of sirens grew louder, and their window of escape rapidly closed. The sound of FBI sirens echoed down the alley as the van's door slammed shut. Victor's eyes darted around, panic flashing across his face for the first time since Tomas had seen him. The briefcase full of encrypted files was now in Tomas's hands, a ticking time bomb that could either secure their freedom or send them straight to prison. Get us out of here. Rachel hissed at the driver, a man they'd picked up earlier under an assumed name. His face was blank, focused only on the road ahead. I'm trying, he replied, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Tomas glanced through the rearview mirror and saw the flashing lights approaching fast. FBI units were everywhere. They had to move quickly. We need a new route. Head toward the Hudson. Tomas shouted, trying to keep his cool as adrenaline surged through him. The driver nodded, swinging the van into a sharp turn down a side street, away from the main road where the FBI was surely setting up a blockade. But the chase was far from over. Tomas could hear the police vehicles in hot pursuit, the screech of tires and the blare of sirens growing louder. We're not going to outrun them like this, Jake muttered, his hand on his sidearm, ready for any confrontation that might come their way. Rachel turned to Tomas, her eyes hard with determination. Tomas, what's the play? We can't keep running forever. We have to make a stand. He had to think fast. The gold and the files in the briefcase were valuable, but his main concern was getting them all out alive. Head to the docks. We'll find a boat. I have a contact waiting. The docks. It was their only chance. The van skidded to a halt at the entrance to the South Street seaport, where the sound of the Hudson River crashing against the pier echoed through the night. In the distance, a private yacht bobbed gently in the water, ready for their escape. But the FBI was closing in. Victor, still clutching the briefcase, led the group as they sprinted toward the boat. Jake kept his head on a swivel, scanning the area for any signs of law enforcement. Rachel was already on the phone with someone, coordinating their next steps. As they neared the boat, Tomas felt a pang of unease. Everything had gone too smoothly until now. It was almost as if someone was waiting for them. And just as he thought that, he saw two FBI agents emerge from behind a storage container. Hands up, freeze! Jake fired first, a warning shot aimed at the ground near their feet. The FBI agents hesitated, giving the crew just enough time to climb aboard the boat. Tomas, Rachel, and Victor scrambled onto the deck. But as Tomas reached the railing, something struck him like a bolt of lightning. There was no one steering the boat. Panic surged in Tomas's chest. Who had set this up? Where was their escape plan? Go! Go! Tomas shouted, pushing Rachel toward the helm. But it was too late. The two agents had called for backup, and Tomas knew there was no way they could outrun the fleet of FBI boats now approaching from the river. Just as the boat's engines roared to life, a voice echoed from behind Tomas. You didn't think I'd just let you walk away, did you, Tomas? Tomas turned to see Victor standing in front of him, holding a gun. His face was cold, but there was something different about his expression, something darker. Victor, what the hell is this? Tomas demanded, his voice trembling with anger and disbelief. Victor's lips curled into a smirk. I knew you'd want to run. You always were the same. But the truth is, Tomas, you've been a pawn in a much bigger game. He raised the gun slightly, eyes narrowing. I'm taking the briefcase. You can swim if you want, but I'm going to be long gone before the cops even get here. Tomas couldn't believe it. Victor wasn't just a part of the heist. He had played them all along. He had led them straight into a trap. And now, with the FBI closing in, Victor was ready to double-cross them for the final payout. Rachel and Jake stepped forward, but Tomas held his hand up. Don't. This ends now. Victor laughed, shaking his head. You don't get it, do you? The FBI, the gold. It was all part of the plan. You were just a diversion. I knew you'd want the money, but I got something much bigger than that. Tomas's blood ran cold. Was Victor working for someone else? Who was behind this whole operation? Before he could ask another question, the boat jolted as it was hit by two FBI boats. Agents poured onto the deck, weapons drawn. The game was over. The next few hours were a blur. Tomas, Rachel, Jake, and Victor were arrested on the boat. The gold was recovered, but the briefcase, the key to everything, was gone. Tomas was taken to the FBI's headquarters for questioning. As the hours ticked by, the investigators worked tirelessly to piece together what had happened. But there was one thing they didn't know. Victor had vanished. Despite Tomas's insistence that he had been betrayed, the FBI wasn't convinced. They saw Tomas as a crucial player in the heist and were determined to use him to track down Victor's mysterious backers. Days later, Tomas was indicted on charges of theft, conspiracy, and fraud. But the briefcase remained an enigma, filled with files that had been down powerful people, but locked away somewhere Victor could never be found. Months later, Tomas sat in his prison cell, staring at the wall. His mind raced over everything that had happened, how the perfect heist had gone wrong, and how Victor had played them all. Then one day, he received an envelope. Inside was a single key and a note. I'm not done with you yet. Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th and Main. If you want answers, you'll have to play my game. Tomas knew this wasn't over. And in that moment, he realized that his involvement in this heist was just the beginning of something much darker. The game wasn't finished yet. Don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories like this. Coming soon.